WLP 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Mubarakah Ibrahim, and we are streaming live on TuneIn Radio. We are on Facebook Live. We are on Periscope. We are on any place that you want to find us, that you are online. And if you just happen to be in your car, driving to work, or driving to a meeting inside of the New Haven, Connecticut area, then you can also find us on the radio. And it is Wednesday morning, and this is your Wednesday morning voice, Mubarakah Ibrahim, and we are having kind of a muggy day today. And it's a little bit muggy. It's not hot, it's just, I think the humidity is like really high today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, ultra high humidity. So, hopefully we will release some humidity, but it hasn't rained in a minute. I think the rain normally comes after this.
I know, but
Yeah.
I thought it was going to yesterday, and even this morning when I was driving to work, I said, oh, the sky looks like it's about to,
Yes.
and then it doesn't.
Yeah.
So.
It just gives us all the humidity that's supposed to come with rain, but not actually the rain. So we are talking about financial literacy and home ownership today. With us, we have Bridgette Russell. Thank you for joining me.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank God, I look halfway decent. I did not know. I thought we were just here for a radio show, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
We're on video.
And just roll out of bed here, but thank you. Okay.
I apologize. I keep forgetting to remind people,
please.
We're not just radio anymore. We're radio, video, social media. We're a little bit of everything all together. So today, I'm actually excited to learn. I tell people, this is one of the reasons why I do this show, is because it's a great way for me learning about things that I want more information on, that I think that is really important, and I know is a part of conversations that I hear and that I have with friends, and talking about home ownership and financial literacy and how it affects not just economics in general in our country, but particularly the economics and economic situation of the African American community, is a really important topic and something that's close to me.
Mm-hmm.
I know, so for everybody who knows me, know that, my main kind of the biggest part of my advocacy is health and wellness. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that brought me to financial literacy was going to a conference and hearing an entire lecture about how your zip code is more important than your DNA code.
Mm.
Where your economic state is such a predictor of health that it is really a part of public health, really helping people in their economics and financial literacy and coming up on the economic scale. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it's all a part of health. Your money health is just as important as your physical health. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I know I'm really, really interested in, and definitely interested in sharing information. But before we get started into this conversation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bridgette. So Bridgette serves as the managing director for the Home Ownership Center at the Neighborhood Housing Service of New Haven.
NHS.
NHS. There's an acronym for it. She manages program development for client services and staff training for the HOC, that's the Home Ownership Center. There's an acronym for it. She also directs operations of pre- and post-purchase curriculum design, credit counseling, financial literacy, foreclosure intervention counseling, and full cycle lending. A graduate of the College of William and Mary with a degree in political science, Bridgette has also completed coursework with the Neighbor Works Training Institute, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and Hood. With more than 27 years experience in financial management training and residential real estate, Bridgette has partnered with banks, nonprofit, and faith-based organizations to develop and present home buyers and financial literacy programs in Atlanta, Orlando, Baltimore, Oakland, Little Rock, San Antonio, and much of New Haven. So this lady knows her stuff. Get your pen and pencil. We are gonna get into some really good information. so first thing that I want to talk about a little bit is, I think that we have a lot of information going around about like home ownership and people should own their homes, but why is that particularly important? A lot of people are like, well, if I rent, then I can rent here and I can move when I want, and like, what is the kind of like the history of home ownership, and why is that even something that people should try to achieve?
Okay, so home ownership, something that's really near and dear to my heart. Though I know, and I always add this disclaimer, that home ownership is not something that you should be pushed into. You should be ready to take on both the responsibilities and the obligations, and as well as the benefits that come with home ownership. But one of the reasons why home ownership is so near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to look at my community. I'm going to look at minority communities and particularly at the African American community. When you look at the wealth divide, which a lot of times they talk about on major news networks, but the wealth divide between white households and African American households, when you look at the various tools that have been effective in making inroads in that wealth divide, home ownership has been a powerful tool. So to me, that's reason one why it's so very important.
And what is some of the, so I know that particularly, so my, I guess, knowledge of home ownership, or kind of like where my timeline kind of begin is after the war, when they began to give soldiers
the VA,
to give them loans to buy homes, that kind of like this first divide began to happen, where they created redlining. They didn't let black people actually buy homes, even with the money, even with the credit. They would not allow black people to buy homes in certain areas. So how did that affect kind of like the wealth of the home, those people, and how does that affect us today?
So if you think about it, that gave the average white household a tremendous jump, an advantage in terms of wealth building. Because at one time, to purchase a home, you literally had to have 20% to put down to purchase a home. And I think there was the creation, not only the VA, which was able to help people who had served the country with low down payment loans, there was the FHA. And the creation of FHA actually is what allowed a lot of the average, and I'm going to say white American.
Is the FHA a federal program?
Yeah, that's the federal government program, FHA insured mortgages. It's been around for a while. It allows you to put down as little as 3.5% and actually become a homeowner. But as you said, the important thing, it wasn't the equalizer for people of color or minority households, because there was a lot of redlining that was done by the banks that provided the FHA insured mortgages. So you didn't go directly to FHA in Washington, D.C. or the HUD to get the mortgage. You had to go to a lender that was approved as an FHA lender. But if that lender was redlining, and for those of you who don't know what redlining is, think of a pen, think of a red pen, and think of lenders just going through certain areas, certain streets, where they just drew a red line through and basically said, we are not going to do lending in these areas. But besides the fact that there was the redlining of areas,
and
there
those
was just
areas were mostly African American areas.
Exactly. But not only that, it was the lender that you went to see about getting a mortgage. If I wanted to buy wherever I wanted to buy, you had the lenders that were discriminating against you when you came in and denying minority or African American mortgages at disproportionate kind of rates. And then when you actually did the study between maybe that average white household that came in with the black household, and you found that they were pretty comparable, but the black household was being denied. So that went on. Then you had a real estate industry that practiced discrimination, steering, which unfortunately, like racism, steering is still alive and well within the real estate industry.
What's that?
Unfortunately, and steering is basically, think of, you're steering your automobile and you're about to automobile. Boy, that one old school car. I'm not that old, but anyway, when you're steering and you're actually directing people to certain areas. So, for instance, I see that you're a Muslim, and I see other Muslims live in this area. So all of a sudden, I'm just showing you homes in this area. I see that you're Puerto Rican, or you're Mexican, or you're African American, whatever. I'm more or less making the decision of where I should be taking you to see homes. Okay. So and that was just rampant. And they still, the Connecticut Fair Housing Center in Hartford talks about how they have testers to go out to real estate companies where they might have heard something back from. They send testers. They'll send a couple, and they basically have the same credit income profile. One might be Puerto Rican, one might be African American, one might be Mexican or whatever, and white, and to see where they show homes.
Wow.
Where they take them to see homes.
So steering is, they're not showing you home based on the home that you can afford, but based on
where they think you should be.
Okay. And they still do that today?
They still do that, and there are people, believe it or not, there are people who they do it on an unconscious level. They don't even realize that
unconscious bias.
Yeah, exactly. And that, to me, that's a lot worse than conscious bias, because at least I know you know what you're doing. But there are some people who honestly think, I'm not racist. I just thought you'd feel comfortable among your own people. So so you still get that, but it's out there, it's alive and well, and people should look out for that.
So when we talk about home ownership as a means of bridging that gap, can you give us kind of like really practical ways, like how does that bridge an economic gap for families?
Because I want to share with you guys, I was recently at a convening in Baltimore, which was really, it was eye-opening in some ways, because there were just statistics that were presented from the Urban Institute. The convening I was at was something, I belong to a national network, NeighborWorks America, and they brought in homeownership center managers and directors from across the country. And they had a lot of other seasoned professionals in the room to talk about home ownership. That's what we do. And some of the stats that were brought up were especially frightening in a sense, because it seems like there has been some backward movement when it comes to ownership. But you were talking about, in looking at wealth, they had some stats that were presented by the Urban Institute that actually looked at households. And so it basically said, it looked at African Americans, and it said if you were renting, basically your household wealth was averaging maybe just above $4,000 as a renter, versus a home owner, where you'd see the overall wealth, the equity and everything go to like about $107,000. So there are stark differences between where you stand as a renter through life and if you're a homeowner. So
but how does home ownership change that dynamic?
So home ownership changes that dynamic because when you purchase a home, so say I bought my first home and I paid $65,000 for that small Cape 3-bedroom, 1-bath home. And it wasn't the home that had all my wants. It had my needs. I needed 3 bedrooms. I wanted 2 bathrooms. It had 1 bathroom, but I saw in it that eventually there was a place where I could build a 2nd bathroom. And so I knew buying it at $65,000, anything that I put into the house, I would definitely see that back in appreciation or in the upward value of the house. So you buy your first house, and then maybe you're in it for 10 years, and maybe by the time you're getting ready to sell, the market is such where that same house I bought for $65,000, maybe I can sell that house for $110,000 or $120,000. So I always tell everyone that the equity in a house is the difference between what you owe the bank and what you can sell it for in the open market. So what a ready and able buyer is going to pay for your house. So that equity is part of your wealth. I mean, that equity, you can use that equity to either go to that next house, that larger house. You can use equity in terms of a gift that you might give your children in terms of their first purchase. You can use a portion of equity sometimes toward an investment in the future of your kids in college education. But that growth, that equity is part of your wealth building. So it's an effective wealth building tool. I never say home ownership is the only wealth building tool, but honestly, it has been the tool that has helped African American families make the greatest inroads into the wealth divide. So, I mean, because we could go on and you could talk about investment vehicles and things like that as well. But to me, I look at home ownership as usually the biggest investment that the average person makes in a lifetime.
If you are just tuning in, you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio. This is Mornings with Mubarakah, and we are talking about home ownership and the wealth divide with Bridgette Russell, who is the managing director at Neighborhood Housing Services.
Yes. And so, and a point I wanted to make, I was sharing with everybody how I was at a convening and we had someone from the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C. that was bringing up some of the latest stats on home ownership. This is what really struck me, and it struck a number of people that were in that room with me. So home ownership rates for African American families are down and have actually plummeted 9% since 2008. And in 2008, for you guys, you remember, we had that I call it the mortgage tsunami, where we had a lot of bad mortgage programs that were out there that a lot of people got into that were not sustainable. And so a lot of people ended up losing homes over that. It was more devastating. And anytime you have anything like that, it's always more devastating for communities of color. And that just economically looking at, how behind we are because of a lot of the systemic racism that was in existence. And we talked about some of it in terms of redlining and what banks did and not giving mortgages to families of color. But So any losses are always going to be more devastating to our community. So the unfortunate thing is, after this 2008 crisis, which really went from 2008 probably well into 2012 before it started turning around somewhat, we lost 9% in overall home ownership. So right now, what that means at the end of the day is 42% of all African Americans own homes now today in America. This is lower. It's first time in 15 years where they ever saw a dip in rates, but since fair housing was actually implemented, this is the first time since the implementation of fair housing that we've actually seen the rate go down. And because home ownership has been the most effective tool, for African American households in bridging that wealth divide. That's particularly scary. So now the wealth divide is at 30%. We have 72% of white households that own their home. Compared to 42% of African American households, and I think it's 42.7% of Hispanic households.
So is this dip due to African Americans not less new homeowners, or people who were homeowners losing their houses? Are African Americans not trying to buy homes anymore?
So, fortunately, when and all of the homeownership centers, we looked at our areas of the country, because there are always different nuances in different areas of the country. So one of the things that I can say here, and I've noticed for the past 2 years, and I'm happy about, but our home buyer education classes used to, for me to consider it a particularly large class, it was 25, 26 people. Now, our home buyer education classes have doubled through the past 2 years. And it's like really consistent. And when I say consistent, that's January through December. Normally, when you get around holiday season, you see a drop off in class. And in January, it's usually a smaller class, and then they build right up. But the thing that I've been seeing in Connecticut, because there are other nonprofit housing counseling agencies in Connecticut, and we usually get together at our Connecticut Housing Finance Authority. They have meetings for all of us. And so I talk to the other managers and directors, and I see a trend throughout Connecticut that we are all consistently having large homebuyer education classes, landlord classes, even a build up in the money management kind of financial literacy boot camp classes. And that's a good thing. And I see predominantly a lot of people of color in the classes. So I'm happy about that, because what I feel my mission, my mantra after I came from this last convening is working on all the ways that we can reverse what has happened in terms of the loss of African Americans as homeowners, as homeowners. And so some of the things that we looked at, well, when people ask, well, why has this happened? I said, we suffered a lot more in terms of loss from this last mortgage tsunami. So then you might ask the question, okay, well, now recovery period has come through, and why aren't more inroads being made for African American homeowners? So then that's when we kind of did an analysis of, okay, when we buy homes, a lot of times for African American homeowners, when they buy their first home, they're in more debt than the average white household. And so does that impact, being able to sustain home ownership? I say definitely. Because if you're in more debt, and say you get into more debt, because some of the things that people will do when they purchase a home, even though we we really caution people against it. It's like, get into your new home, get an idea of what the utility costs are going to be, what are some of the maintenance issues that you might have coming up, before you go do things like buy a car for the good driveway, or go to Raymore and Flanagan and charge a bunch of furniture and get into a lot more debt. So we really caution people about that. But looking at the fact that, okay, if the average African American household is starting in more debt, you're kind of starting behind an 8 ball there. So what can we do about that? And that's really looking at expanding what we do with our credit boot camp, our debt management programs, to really get people to change that mindset in terms of how they look at debt and incurring new debt, right. Especially credit card debt.
So buying a house, so for people who are excited about, like, okay, I'm inspired, then I'm going to go try to buy a house, it actually starts before that. You have to kind of prepare your finances to do. So that's one of the so if I'm understanding correctly, that's kind of like one of the solutions to this problem that we now have of this less African Americans. Okay, let's start back with getting people in a financial situation to not just buy a home but sustain that home ownership.
I'm going to tell you, because number one, it doesn't make any difference if, I can go there today and they tell me I qualify for a loan and I can buy a house. There are questions that you need to ask yourself. Like sometimes when someone comes into my office and says, hey, Bridgette, I'm coming here because I know you know about down payment programs. I got a loan. I want to buy a house. And I always say, well, what type of loan do you have? What is the interest rate? And people look at me, Mubarakah, like, oh, I don't really know that. I just was so happy that they said I was approved for a loan. And the reason why these are some of the questions that you have to ask is because, first of all, I think people don't understand there are a lot of different loans out here for first-time home buyers. And there are banks that have their own specific loans. And these are loans that they create because there are these community reinvestment act goals that are federally mandated that they have to meet. So they don't do it out of the goodness of their heart. They do it because it's a federal mandate. So People's United Bank has PAM, People's Affordable Mortgage. And that particular mortgage product might have things like a lower interest rate, no private mortgage insurance, where mortgage insurance is an insurance that they put in your loan that makes your mortgage payment that much higher. It doesn't protect you, it protects the lender in case you default. And normally they think, well, if you're putting down less than 20%, you're more risky. So I'm going to put this premium in your loan. And for a $170,000 loan, that might be like a $145 payment. So if I could get a mortgage that either had no private mortgage insurance or a lower rate of private mortgage insurance, that's going to be more beneficial for me, the homeowner. So I feel like a lot of people don't do their homework at the very beginning and know what their options are. So you're not always getting the best option. You're being steered into whatever the lender might consider an option where they're going to make more money off of. So one of the things I want people to do is do their homework so that they know the different mortgage products that different lenders offer that are specifically for first-time home buyers, as well as the state product like Connecticut Housing Finance Authority. There are a lot of other options out there other than FHA, and I think a lot of minorities, frankly, I know this, are steered toward FHA. FHA is not a bad option. As I said, it's a government product that's been around for years, but it's not always the best option. And I want to make sure people know what the best choice, that they have choices out there, and I want them to know their options so that they can make the best choice. So just getting back to the fact that people come in and they say, I'm qualified, and I don't even know what the interest rate or the mortgage product is, but they're anxious to get into it. So that's not kind of doing your homework and knowing, is this the best product for my particular situation?
Now, you said that it used to be that people had to put 20% down. Now it's as low as 3%.
Sometimes 1%, depending
what,
on the
product. What is the determining factor of how low they will go for your down payment?
All of it is based on the product that was created. Like there was a Smart Move product that's created that's a 1% down payment.
What do you mean the product? Like
so the mortgage product. So different lenders create different products that they're really gearing toward first-time home buyers. So one bank might have a product where it's a 3% down. One bank might have a product where it's a 1% down.
But if the product is lower, do you pay more in the back end?
So that's a very good question, and that's why I always like to say to people, whenever you're working with a lender and suppose they're pre-qualifying you for 2 or 3 products, you want them to give you what your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payment is going to be. And then you also want what your out-of-pocket expense is going to be, because this should all be on the table before you kind of make up your mind on what product might be the best for you. And a lot of times I just feel like people have part of the information and then they just start the process. Like, oh, I went to the lender. They told me I'm qualified for $220,000. Now I'm just going out to get a loan. And I'll say, or to find a house. And I'll say, well, do you know what $220,000 translates into in terms of your mortgage payment? So then the first thing I ask them is, where do you want to be? What's comfortable? Based on your budget, based on what you pay out every month, what do you think is comfortable as a housing expense? And so a lot of times people are backing into it. So they might tell me, well, $1,300. And I said, well, if you have a $220,000 mortgage, let me break that down for you in terms of principal and interest at the interest rate, what the average taxes are for houses out there that you're looking for, and what your average cost might be for homeowners insurance. And then I might say, well, it looks like if you're at 220, you know, it's going to be somewhere around in between 17 and 1800. And then someone might, oh, wow, that's not really comfortable for me. So to me, maybe first step for sustainability is really looking at your budget and getting a mortgage that's really comfortable to your pocketbook. So that's kind of a first step.
So let's reverse, kind of like engineer it. When you are going for, how do you know that you are ready to take that step? Like, what do you need in your finances? Where do you need to be? Because a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people. Some people that I talk to, they feel like, oh, well, my job is per hour. It's not salary. I can't afford a house. So they really look at kind of like where they are currently socially and economically, as opposed to kind of like this is a stepping stone to getting higher. So where do people? Where should they start? Yeah, where should they start when they to even consider like, okay, maybe home ownership is my next step.
Okay, so this is what I tell people, and it's funny. I was at a seminar last night at Liberty Bank on Whaley Avenue. Had a small home buyer education seminar, and we were talking about first steps. And so at NHS, I mean, this is some of what we do. So whether it's our nonprofit or another nonprofit housing counseling agency, you would come in, and to me, it's meeting with a housing specialist or a housing counselor, getting your credit report pulled. And one thing I have to tell you guys out there are so many different credit scoring models out there, and it gets confusing for individuals. I mean, there's Credit Karma, freecredit.com, 1,000,001 different credit scoring models, and I don't think most people realize that all credit scoring models are not the same. So there's a different credit scoring model for what they use when you're buying a car, to when you're getting a credit card, to when you're buying a house.
Really? I always thought it was just like one number.
Nope. So you might go to Karma and somebody might tell me, hey, Bridgette, I know my credit is ABC or 680, and maybe I pull based on what the lenders are going to pull for mortgage financing. We all pull the same. So we're going to look at the Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. And what they always do is cross out the highest, cross out the lowest, and base all the credit decisions on the middle number. And sometimes when people come to me with a Karma, that Karma might say they're 680, but according to my pool, they're like a 640, because some are only looking at one of the three major credit bureaus, and some have their own different algorithm for how they compute the credit scoring number. So that's one thing I want people to understand. So when you go to a lender, or when you go to us as a nonprofit, we do a soft pull. We do the same pull that the lenders do, but ours is a soft pull, so it doesn't hit your credit score.
Okay.
So first of all, you need to find out where you stand. Okay, and then if there's some work that you have to do on your credit, be put on that action plan so that you're doing what you need to do to bring the score to where it needs to be. For first-time home buyers, I'm going to tell them that generally, as a rule of thumb, there are great programs out there starting at 620. I probably am one who, I'm not a minimalist, and I probably really want to put people on that upward trajectory so that they have more options. So a 620, you'll have a couple of options. But when you start to move up to 640, 650, 660, you'll have a number of first time home buying options. Like I was telling you before, every lender has their program. Bank of America has they just started a $5 billion home ownership initiative. They have $17,500 in grant money that you can possibly get at Bank of America, as long as you get a first mortgage with them, one of their affordable first mortgages.
And the grant does what? It gives you...
So the grant will help you with closing costs, and closing costs are the costs to actually get the loan, and with your 3% down payment. In their particular program, it's a 3% down payment. So that's why, once again, I go to people, it's good to find out the options, because you go to one lender, they just tell you what they have. You really need to find out what's out there so that you can figure out what might be the best option for you. And that is what I consider one of my jobs. My job is to find out all the down payment programs, all the different first-time home buyer programs, so that if somebody sits with me, I can go through the different programs. But just getting back to first steps, you get a review of your credit. Sometimes I pull a credit, everything is fine, and in terms of score, but maybe I'm going to make recommendations about paying down your credit card debt, getting your debt down as low as possible. And so that's a big thing for me now. Now that I see the national stats are in, and that African Americans typically go into home ownership with more debt, I mean, that's going to be one of the things that'll be one of our mantras in our credit boot camp, which debt elimination strategies to get that debt down as low as possible, so that you can more comfortably enjoy home ownership, and you're prepared for any of the things that you might have to do in terms of maintenance, because any homeowner will tell you owning a home is like owning a project. It's a project at a time. There's always something to be done.
If you got a leak, there's nobody to call.
Yes,
you got to figure out how to fix it, or call somebody that you have to pay to fix it.
Exactly, exactly.
Can't blame the landlord. You are the landlord.
No, that you are right there.
So it sounds like two things that people need to pay attention to determine if they're ready for that step is what their credit score is, how much debt that they actually have, and is there anything else?
Your budget is big.
Is really important.
I'm going to tell you, a lot of people remember when you go to a lender, the lender is going to look at my gross income, and they're going to make a calculation based on my gross to say this is what you can afford. Now, I always ask my class, how many of y'all take home gross? I mean, most of us take home net. And so that's why I go back to the budget. The budget, to me, is the indicator of success. And if you really have a true budget where and that's one thing we help people do, really come up with that true budget. Because sometimes people bring me fake budgets. Was a fake budget? You have a few things down there. But then when we start to really drill down, when I say, well, wait a minute. You tell me you bring this net home, and these are your expenses, so you should have this surplus every month. And they're like, well, I don't have that surplus. And I'm saying, so there must be something else. Let's really think about it. And sometimes it's a couple of sessions, and people come up, oh yeah, I paid this month. Oh yeah, I paid that. Oh, food at work or eating out tend to be, to me, those are the biggest expenses that people have no accounting for. But then when they really sit down with a spending journal, and then they realize what they're doing, that's when they're going, oh my gosh, I'm spending like $225 a month at work in terms of coffee, lunch, whatever that they're going out for to get. So I think it's a lot of what we don't know we're doing. A lot of times we don't know what money we're spending, and it's empowering when you're kind of accountable in a journal, and you can see in black and white, oh wow, this is what I've been doing.
So is that kind of like a tip that we can give people that you do? So explain a spending journal.
So spending journal, I'd say, well, you as a health and wellness fitness guru, and you talk about your journal, because I've been in your classes before about journaling and, keeping track. It is powerful. And so the same thing with your spending. So if you had a little journal and you could pick up something from Walgreens or CVS, and I usually have a customer do 3 columns, the date, the item, and the amount. And sometimes we'll do a spending journal challenge of, okay, for 60 days, you have got to write down everything that you spend. And the reason why it's so powerful is, number one, it'll make you not spend sometimes because you don't want to write it down, right? Or sometimes you're just like, wow, is this a need? Is this a want? Is this getting me any closer to my goal in home ownership?
Right. I went into Walgreens to buy something for $10, and I came out spending $32.50.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And you can do it if you don't keep track of stuff. And we all do that.
Yeah.
And the spending journal challenge has been powerful for people, because sometimes when I feel the budget's not really real, like, you're saying, well, I don't have this kind of surplus, and I'm saying, well, this is what your net income is, and this is what you're telling me your expenditures are, so we're missing some expenditures. And a lot of times the only way you can catch those is by keeping a spending journal, because it really was one of the moms I was working with, that's when she realized, wow, I'm spending $212 at lunch every month. Wow. And when you see the monthly figure, I think that's when it hits you. Yeah. And I am telling you no lie, but there was a couple that I was counseling, and they were literally spending $1,000 in eating out on a monthly basis. That's a lot of money, and they really didn't realize it until they wrote down how many times they actually went out.
There's an app called mint.com.
Oh yes.
And it will do that for you too, and it will show you, like, it will literally categorize things for you, so you can go back to see what you've been doing before you're like starting to change your habits because you're spending. You can actually like download the last 60 days and be like, oops.
Yes. This is between me and the app.
I know.
I'm not going to show anybody. But, I mean, it is
like,
powerful.
Yeah, Miss Russell, I haven't started tracking yet.
We don't want to look at... So what is the past is a past.
Right?
We're just talking about moving forward.
We're not worried about the past. We have to move forward now, right? We don't want to linger there.
No, we don't have to. We don't have to.
Awesome. We have just a few more minutes left in the show. Can you give some kind of like a lasting advice for people who want to take the next steps into home ownership, and definitely tell people how they can get in touch with you if they're interested in your financial literacy or your home ownership program?
Okay, so guys, I will be making an announcement when we have this new and improved, enhanced financial literacy program where we have the Culturally Competent series. I'm super, super excited about that and about bringing that back to New Haven. But for now, we do have a credit boot camp. We do have individual counseling services. So I like to say we meet you wherever you are in the home ownership process. If you come to us and you just need the 8-hour home buyer education, I can offer you that. Sometimes people need the education and they say, you know what, I know I'm credit ready. I would love for you to sit down and talk to me, Bridgette, about the mortgage options, about the different down payment and closing options that are available on a statewide basis. And that's a great thing to do. But if you're at the very beginning and you don't know what your credit score is like, or you really want to bring your credit higher, then that's when you really want to engage with the program, which you can go online and you can actually register for the program. You can do everything online, upload documents online. There is a one-time $75 fee if you want to engage with the counseling services where we're going to run your credit and you're going to be assigned a housing specialist. You would actually pay online. You would actually schedule your appointment online. And for those of you who might not be with a computer, we still have the old-fashioned paper applications that you can actually be emailed, or you can come into the office in between the hours of 9 to 5 and pick up.
And
we
the
are
office
on
is
333 Sherman Avenue, not too far from where you are, in New Haven, and we're open 9 to 5. And my big thing that I might say in close to people who want to become homeowners is just do your homework. And part of, I think it's my job, my mantra as the director at the Home Ownership Center is to go out there, have the relationships with the different lenders so that I can get all the information on the first time home buying programs, so that it can kind of be a one-stop shop where I can tell you what all the different lenders have to offer, and then we can kind of find the program that might be best for you, because there's no one size fits all. That's one thing that I want people to know. And to me, I think it's a shame if you leave money on the table. So you're buying somewhere, you could have qualified for a down payment and closing costs program that you left on the table. Shame on you. So so do your homework. Come on, do your preparation first before you jump into home ownership. Make sure you're where you need to be. And I'm going to encourage people to go into home ownership and get their debt load down. You know, not be tapped out with everything, and now you're putting a mortgage on top of it. So my whole thing is what we talked about at the very beginning. We said it's not just getting people into homes, but sustainable home ownership. I want you to enjoy your home. Awesome. I want you to go on vacation too. So
awesome.
Enjoy your family.
Thank you so much for joining us. That was really, really educational. I learned a lot, and hopefully you learned something. And if you want to know more, certainly reach out to Bridgette. And I would like to thank you for joining us. You have been listening to Mornings with Mubarakah on 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio, and streaming live on tuneinradio.com. I want to invite you back to join us next Wednesday, but in the meantime, if you just so happen to want to hear this episode again or previous episodes, you can find all of our shows archived on iTunes and SoundCloud, as well as the New Haven Independent Facebook page. The video is there. Okay. And you can share it, and you can go back and listen. So until next week, go about your week and be a voice and not an echo.